Well, we were discussing Ashwapati's ascent in his yoga, and what we see is Ashwapati is conquering, if I can use the word, each level or each plane of consciousness as he ascends. So what we see here is that suddenly there is a level of or a plane of consciousness where the occult nature, or as he calls it, the secret nature, opens up to him. Because you see, there is one secret in our yoga that is not only in our yoga, in yoga as such, you see, there is the Purusha and the Prakriti, the soul and nature in all of us. The difference between each one of us is the difference between how far one's nature or how far one's Purusha is under the control of nature. To begin with, we are all under this control, survey of Prakriti. But the whole meaning and purpose of yoga is to reverse the order. If you remember, there was a beautiful long description of the interplay or the relation between Purusha and Prakriti, where we see Sri Aurobindo describing in marvelous romantic poetry all that the Purusha does under the sway of Prakriti. And he does everything as if in order to please Prakriti, and for that he even, surrenders himself, goes by the whims and fancies and caprices of nature. But then, towards the end, we see a relation where there is a reversal of the relation between Purusha and Prakriti. And when there is the reversal, when Purusha says, "I'm sorry Prakriti, enough is enough, I've been under your control long enough, and now I refuse to be under your control." So that is the turning point, what the mother and Sri Aurobindo would tell us, is the reversal of consciousness. What is the reversal of consciousness? It's precisely this. Up until now, we are all under the consciousness of Prakriti, but when, because of our constant effort, what is known as personal effort in our yoga, which is stamped by aspiration, rejection and surrender, and in one word, by self-control, in another word, by the process of purification, in another manner, the process of rejection. By these processes, there begins slowly a situation where Purusha starts saying that I will be your master and not you my master. So this is the point of the reversal of consciousness. Otherwise, we normally, when we say ordinary man or an ordinary life or an ordinary person, there's nothing to do with somebody's position in society or the money power, nothing of the external. It's just this much, how much are we under the sway of nature? Meaning, nature or Prakriti has its different modes and moods. You have passions, you have fancies, you have anger, you have jealousies, you have a whole swing of moods, and you are never left alone. It's like, as the mother sometimes describes, like a cork, a ball of cork on the waves of ocean. So it's constantly it is being beaten up here, thrown up there, and the cork ball never can be stable. And so she says, we are like a cork ball, and nature is constantly swaying us up and down, drowning, throwing anger. And we sometimes justify ourselves, we sometimes argue, saying, yes, I was angry, yes, I was jealous, yes, I was this, yes, I was that, and the mind comes to our justification, and it doesn't let us reject these causes. That is where I suppose is the great role of the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, amongst all the scriptures we see the Gita bringing out this psychological factor of the human growth. Gita is not a Hindu philosophy at all. It is pure integral psychology which comes very close to Sri Aurobindo. And that's why I feel Sri Aurobindo took the trouble of writing right in 1910 or 1914, when the Arya began, essays on the Gita. Because those essays were complementary to synthesis of yoga. So imagine in this Hindu spiritual manifesto, almost 3,000 to 4,000 years back, there was this deep search into psychology of how to see that the Prakriti or to see how Purusha can get back his control over Prakriti. And Arjuna asked so many simple questions that you and me would ask today. I mean, it has been perennially the same question: how to get over the lower nature, how to get over passions and jealousies and this and this and this. What do? I do the karma yoga or the jnana yoga or the bhakti yoga or this or that. I mean, it's a marvelous treatise. For the first time in human literature, we see a treatise in psychology. So it's been a great guide how to really overcome your lower nature. And that is what is happening with Ashwapati now. That he is going beyond this lower nature. So there is beyond this lower nature, there is a higher secret nature. And because he is becoming master of his lower nature, then a whole range of higher nature opens up to him. You see, as long as the relation is that the Purusha is under the control, influence, sway of Prakriti, no higher regions of consciousness ever open up. Because the receiver of these higher regions of consciousness is the Purusha, not Prakriti. Well, our mind may reflect some intuition, some inspiration. At times it does catch a higher truth. But it is only when the Purusha kind of, corrects itself, saying that I am the Lord, And the moment the Purusha says to oneself, I am the Lord of my Prakriti, that is the point of realization. So what exactly is realization? It is the realizing who I am in reality. It is only that. Otherwise there is no other realization. It's not that suddenly there is a 10,000 luminosity. No. You see, if I say I have realized my mistake, what does it mean? That I have come to know what exactly I did and where I went wrong. The word realization is to come to understand my astitva, my reality. So realization is nothing but the soul saying, hey, I am the master. Sorry Prakriti, you are not the master. So that is the turning of the ordinary man into the spiritual man. I mean, that's why Sri Aurobindo, I think somewhere here itself he will say, you continue to do the action that you are doing. You are going to your office, you are going to your work, you are going to your garden work, everywhere. The outer work of Prakriti continues to be what it is. But the only thing is, today who is the master? Purusha or the Prakriti? Previously I used to do all that and say that I am the master and Purusha is the slave. And when I realize the yogi continues to do the same works, but the reversal is there that Purusha says, I am the master and you obey me. So this is the fundamental thesis of all yoga that we see in India. And this started long back in the Sankhya Yoga, where they said the right relationship can be brought about by the very first, or not the very first step, but what we see as the mother would tell us that first of all you must want to set right the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. Then as Sankhya says, you can get back your right relationship only if you practice the witness Purusha aspect or the witness Purusha sadhana. What is that witness Purusha? That you are the observer. So if we can practice in our daily life the stance of the observer. Observer of what? Observer of the outer nature in you to begin with and outside you. So this observation itself, if it lasts and is continuous, there will come a point where there's a snapping, as if there's a snapping between the Purusha and Prakriti, and the Purusha says, done. Now I know all this while that looking at my shadow in the pool of water, I thought that is me. But suddenly says, no, that is only my reflection in nature. And when do you see the reflection as reflection? When the waters are quiet. If the waters are all disturbed, even if you look up yourself in the water, you don't see your image. So they said, let your nature be quiet, and then you see, my God, I was there as a reflection, that's not me. So you see the beautiful yogic stances. The outer nature must be calm. Then I see myself in the image, as an image. But even there it takes me a long time to see myself as an image, because in the beginning I begin to think that's me. But then what Sankhya says is very beautiful. If you start observing, then the point comes where you say, that's my image, that's not me. And the day you say that, you are the Buddha, the enlightened one, the realized one. You see, it's easier to say all this, but this is the process. And why I am telling all that is because Ashwapati has done that. He has gotten away from this question of identifying himself with the image or the shadow of himself in nature. So now he is a liberated man from being a slave to nature. He can ascend, and in this ascent, now even nature collaborates with him. It is as if the occult worlds come to him and say, "Oh Ashwapati, you are the first human person, that mortal, as Sri puts it here." And in the beginning they may show resistance, but once they see that here is a mortal who has come down to our level, or to come up onto our level, then they add on their own powers, their own secrecies to you. So you see, now I can imagine the process of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. You see, one man's perfection can still save the world. This is how I think it can be done. Because if he is attempting this kind of an ascent, all the occult worlds converge on him and saying, "Take my power, I'll give you my secrets." So he becomes a powerful, enriched yogi, and thereby and therefore he can become one man's perfection, that one yogi who can perfect the world. So here in Ashwapati is more or less that's what is happening. So I gave you an introduction to, because here what is happening is, because there are different layers, different persons or different personalities which are surrendering, offering themselves to Ashwapati. And here I'll take up from this line. If you remember, all's miracle here and can by miracle change. Find that line, then we'll continue. Have you got that line? Can you tell us your page? 85. Yeah, those of you who haven't got, see page 85. Yeah. Okay. All's miracle here and can by miracle change. This is that secret nature's edge of might. On the margin of great immaterial plains, in kingdoms of an untrammeled glory of force, where mind is master of the life and form, and soul fulfills its thoughts by its own power, she meditates upon mighty words and looks on the unseen links that join the parted spheres. So we are getting a description of what is this secret power or the secret nature, where mind is master of the life and form, and where on the margin of great immaterial plains in kingdoms of an untrammeled glory of force. You see, this is the region of the level of consciousness where we see mind is master of life and form, which is quite different from what we have. Our mind is not the master of life and form. On the contrary, it is the slave of life and form. But on that level, it's a master. And then on the margin of great immaterial planes, you see, he is kind of locating that secret nature. Where is it? It is beyond the material. Just beyond this physical material nature, there is this immaterial nature, and that is the secret nature that Sri Aurobindo is going to describe. So which is on the margin of great immaterial planes, in kingdoms of an untrammeled glory of force, where mind is so and so, and soul fulfills its thoughts by its own power. And of course, it's a very interesting thing. Soul fulfills its thoughts by its own power. Because you see, in our life, in our nature, soul cannot fulfill its thought. Whatever it wants to, it is not able to, because of the barriers called the mind and the vital and the life. Because of these barriers, it cannot. But on that level, it's a different thing. It's the kind of a soul can come forward, come in front and fulfill whatever it wants to do. She meditates upon mighty words and looks on the unseen links that join the parted spheres. Who is the she? The same secret nature. Meditates upon mighty words. You see, this word, of course, all of you know the question of meditation and concentration and all that. But here, meditation is in the sense of identifying itself with that consciousness. What is that consciousness? The secret nature is identifying itself with those mighty words. Mighty words are the secret mantric words of the higher region, and links that join the parted sphere. The parted spheres, as shown in this language, it is the upper hemisphere and the lower hemisphere. So this world of secret nature links up the upper hemisphere with the lower hemisphere, and there she sees the mantric words. There in that world is the soul that can fulfill itself. Thence to the initiate who observes her laws, she brings the light of her mysterious realms. So from there, from the higher regions, it gives to the initiate, those who are really aspiring to go beyond, she gives what? Light of her mysterious realms. And what is it? Here where he stands, he is that initiate. Here where he stands, his feet on a prostrate world, his mind no more cast into matter's mold. Over their bounds in spurts of splendid strength, she carries their magician processes and the formulas of their stupendous speech, till heaven and hell become purveyors to earth, and the universe the slave of mortal will. So here, what is it that we see? That those who are aspiring, wanting to go up in the ascent of the consciousness, to such people, to such initiates who are otherwise, on the prostrate world is our normal world, to such human beings, what does she bring? His mind is no more cast into matter's mold. So this secret world liberates the mind of this initiates, these aspirants, and over their bounds and spurts of splendid strength, she carries their magician processes. See there, she carries that is, the secret nature carries their magician, what we said about the magic on top, that is, she brings in those processes which seem to be magic to us. That means, I have explained to you before from reading from the mother, that all those things which are like magic and miracle for us, all those things she brings them to this initiate. What does it mean again? That means she opens up our vision in such a manner that I understand, that I come to know what are the things happening on the different levels. Because remember one fundamental basic definition of magic, not definition but what we come to know about magic, there's nothing as magic in the world. There's no miracle in this world. The only thing is, we don't understand the transition of the event from the higher level to the lower level. Like a magician on the stage, we say, wow, what a great magic, how did he bring out that pigeon from the handkerchief? But for the magician, it's not a magic. He does it every hour, every day, because he knows there is only a trick, there's a process. But a process is so fast that the public can't see, and then we say, wow, it's magic. But the magician, he knows. So it's precisely the same way. Miracle is also the same thing. For a yogi, there's no miracle. I have explained to you with some other incidents. For a yogi, there's no incident, there's no miracle. Because he sees the process, the transition of how it has happened on the higher level, how it has descended with such furious speed that I and you can't see. That's why we call it a miracle. But for a yogi, like the magician, where there's no magic, for the yogi also there's no miracle. So such a vision is brought to these people, to these initiates. And the universe, the slave of mortal will. A mediatrix, now the same secret nature, is a mediatrix with veiled and nameless gods, whose alien will touches our human life. Imitating the world magician's ways, she invents for her self-bound free will is grooves, and feigns for magic's freaks a binding cause. Now again, here Sri Aurobindo is kind of, you can see a few of those lines, each sentence, if I can say, is a new picture, is a new image that Sri Aurobindo, the artist, is drawing. So he has given us one picture, and now the second one says that this secret nature is a mediatrix with veiled and nameless gods, whose alien will touches our human life. Of course, we understand now the relationship between the gods and the human beings. They are beyond us. Beyond us in what way actually? They are beyond us, first of all, being more subtle. They don't have the grossness of the physical. So anything more subtle than this physical is always the question of beyond. So because they don't have this physical body, which is the gross, heavy, tamasic body, they are by definition more powerful. Because whatever is subtle, and the subtle is having greater power on the gross. Like we said sometime, our mind is more powerful than the body because the mind is subtler than the body. So in the same manner, the gods are subtler than the mind itself, so they are more powerful than the mind itself. So this is the logic of this creation. The more it is subtle, the greater it is powerful. So it is thereby and therefore the gods are more powerful than us, because they are more subtle in their substance, in their existence, in their being. But this is what the mother would tell us, that in the process of evolution, the human beings would become more powerful than gods by the simple fact that this gross physical body would not be gross anymore, and it will be more subtle. But it will have the subtlety not only of the substance, but a subtlety which will have greater consciousness, that of the supermind. So when this gross body becomes subtle, imbued with the supermind, then of course is more powerful than any gods. Because the weakness of the gods is they don't have a body. The strength of the gods is they don't have this gross body. But if the human being can have a body transformed and the supramental consciousness, he will be much more powerful. So here, so it is those nameless gods whose will touches our human life. Obviously, they are connected with our human life. They are not only connected, but as we know, they play with our human lives, with our emotions, with our needs, with everything. They have their own play, they kind of, play with our emotions. So that is the touch he is speaking about. Imitating the world magician's ways. Who is imitating? Secret nature. What is it imitating? The world magician is the world creator. His ways. And what is she doing? She invents for her self-bound free will is grooves. You see, it's a very complicated structure of sentence. If you can break it down to simpler things, you'll understand. You see, this self or this secret nature has free will, has a free will in itself. But out of its free will, it creates this solid earth or this concrete earth and creates on this concrete earth its law or laws, like the simplest law, what you say, gravitation. It's the law of the physical world. So he says this, out of the free will, the supreme secret nature also creates these grooves of this upon this earth and feigns for magic freaks a binding cause. Although this secret nature knows that it is free will, it has the free will to do what it wants, but then it says no, there are these laws which I must follow. It's another way of putting it. If I can change the image and then put it to in a different manner, you'll understand perhaps. It's like the divine himself. The divine, when it comes as avatar, when he comes down as avatar, he follows the laws of this nature. In one simple example, the avatar's body also becomes old, the avatar's body also becomes sick, the avatar's body also suffers pain. So it is not that we can say, how is it that he is avatar, he is the Purusha, he is this and that he suffers pain. No, he said, because I am following the same law and I will not override my law which I have created. I have created it myself, but I have bound myself with his own laws. So divine is the most lawful person. He is not illegal, unlawful fellow. Although he is the most powerful fellow, but one who has made these laws, but he says, no, I will follow them myself. So similarly, this nature also feigns, she acts that there is a binding cause, although it is herself free. Then it is, all worlds she makes the partners of her deeds, accomplices of her mighty violence, her daring leaps into the impossible. You see, all worlds, not only this physical world, but all the worlds that are there, the subtle worlds, she makes partners of her deeds. She makes accomplices partners of her deeds, accomplices of her mighty violence. You know, this mighty violence is not in the negative sense, but when the higher wants to transform the lower, when the higher nature wants to transform the lower nature, there is sometimes violence because there is a question of breaking up the resistances of the lower world. So that is the mighty violence. And her daring leaps into the impossible. From every source she has taken her cunning means. She draws from the free love marriage of the planes elements for her creations through the force. You see, we are still in the description. Please remember, this is only a description of subtle nature. And then what does she do? From every source she has taken her cunning means. When she is creating or when she is influencing this lower nature, she takes up for her means, for her tricks, for her caprices, every plane. That means that she doesn't say, only I will use the power of my plane. This nature takes help of all the other planes, and Sri Aurobindo puts it a beautiful word here, free love marriage of the planes. That means there is a complete interaction between the different levels of consciousness. This is a free love marriage, there is an absolute interaction. So the nature is not limited to only itself, but it has help of all the other levels of consciousness. Elements for a creation through the force, that is, through the force is a French word, the feat of strength. A wonder weft of knowledge incalculable, a compendium of divine inventions feats. She has combined to make the unreal true, or liberate suppressed reality. So this is the same process that Sri Aurobindo is describing, that is, that this nature, this secret nature is making a compendium of divine inventions feats, that it is in its creativity taking up all that the divine has done in his own, on his own level. And the beauty of this subtle nature is that she has made forever for us what is unreal true. That's an important phrase. The unreal is not illusion. The unreal for you and me, that means the divine or the higher consciousness or the Shakti or whatever you call, that is unreal for me because it's beyond the grasp of my understanding. But this higher nature brings that unreal Shakti or the divinity into concrete matter, where I touch and I say, hey, this is true, because my senses can feel it. So what was unreal, because it was beyond my senses, has become real for me because it is in the grip of the senses. So now that is the work that the nature has done. In her unhedged Circean wonderland, pell-mell she shepherds her occult mightinesses. Now here, there is of course Circean is a Greek mythology where Circe is, as I have found out, is a myth enchantress, a mythological enchantress who could change men into swines and other animals. Well, that's of course a mythological thing, but as a language we could use something that is attractive, bewitching. So I'll take it up as a language and plus this mythological truth, and how do we apply to the secret nature? In her unhedged Circean wonderland, unhedged is of course unbounded. So this secret nature in her unbounded world uses, as he puts it, pell-mell she shepherds her occult mightinesses. Pell-mell in a hurry, she has put together all the things that she could gather and attract. And what are the things now? Here is a whole list of them. So that's why we see here Sri Aurobindo putting a semicolon, and then is describing what are the things that have been put together. Shepherding, putting together. Her mnemonics of the craft of the infinite. Mnemonics, of course, you know the word, it comes from memory. So, these tricks of memory, of the craft of the infinite, memory, that means he is catching the memory of what the infinite did, the infinity or the divine has done. The nature has some memory, so she has put some of those with the help of those memory tricks. And then what next? Jets of the screen, subliminal caprice. The subliminal also throws up its own ways, caprices. It has put that also into the mixture. Tags of the gramarye of inconscience. Gramarye is more like the word is magical. So again, there are things that have come from the inconscious, things that have come from the subliminal, things that have come from the infinite. Freedom of a sovereign truth without a law. Thoughts that are born in the immortal's world. You see, all these things, the thoughts from the subliminal, from the inconscious, from all these things, she's putting all these truths together. And then what happens? Thoughts that are born in the immortal's world, oracles that break out from behind the shrine, warnings from the demonic inner voice, and peeps and lightning leaps of prophecy and intimations to the inner ear. Well, this is, I think, known to all of us here. Oracles that break out from behind the shrine. Well, that's an image from the Greek philosophy or the Greek practices, not philosophy. When you hear an oracle, it's as if the sound is coming from behind the statue, behind the figure. There were this in Greece, the temples of to Apollo. So when there is this oracle, you hear the voice come from behind. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is referring to. Breaks out from behind the shrine and warning from the demonic inner voice. Now this is not the same demon that we have in India when we say demon is a Rakshasa or the negative force. But this daemon is the inner voice. So, warnings from the inner voice, that's the daemon, that the guidance given by the inner voice, and peeps and lightning leaps of prophecy and intimation to the inner ear. So, you see, there's a whole mixture of all these things in the secret world, from the inconscient, from the subliminal, from the superconscient, from the inner voice, from prophecies, from oracles, abrupt interventions, stark and absolute, and the superconscient's unaccountable acts have woven her balanced web of miracles and the weird technique of a tremendous art. So at last we come to the long description of what are the things that go about to making up this world of the secret nature. So abrupt intervention, stark and absolute, and the superconscient's unaccountable acts. You see, we have seen all these things, inconscience, superconscience, etc. And also we have something from the higher supreme range, that superconscient. All these have woven her balanced web of miracles. So this secret nature is a conglomeration, is a mixture of all these things from above, from below, from inside. So it's a world, a magical world, because unlike this world where the things are limited and we have the grossness about it, this world is subtle, it has the superconscient things, inconscient things, subliminal, etc., etc. All these have gone to make up these miracles. And the weird technique of a tremendous art, of course, is weird because, suddenly if we were to face such a world which is conglomeration of all these different worlds, it looks a bit weird because it goes beyond the comprehension, our human comprehension. So this was the secret nature. And now single line says, this bizarre kingdom passed into his charge. So now he has become the master of this kingdom. All the secrets are come into his charge. That means they have been offered to this mortal yogi. That's what I was telling you in my introduction, that when the yogi ascends, these worlds, they give up themselves. So now Ashwapati has got this bizarre kingdom. That's why he uses the word bizarre, because you can see it's a bit of a complex, bizarre thing. But all these are passed into the charge of Ashwapati. And so next line we see, as one resisting more, the more she loves, her great possessions and her power and law she gave, compelled with a reluctant joy. Herself she gave for rapture and for use. So this is, of course, the image is suddenly shifted to the image of a woman. You see all the bizarre descriptions or occult description, that's the beauty that we find. Suddenly he brings in a very human touch. I mean, it's as if to say, okay, boys, you have been troubled too much, I'll give you a simpler image of your own level, you can understand that. What is it? He says, as one resisting more, the more she loves. It's coming to the level of the wife, the girl, the person in somebody's life. So she loves the person, but in trying to give herself, she has first shows the signs of resistance. The woman doesn't give herself up in the first instance. There is some kind of a resistance and a hesitation and then all that. So there is a kind of a resistance because she loves the person, she wants to give herself to the man to whom she loves, but there is an initial resistance. Her great possessions and her power and law, everything that the woman has, from her body to the mental to the physical, all her possessions she wants to give. So similarly, this secret nature also, she gave compelled with a reluctant joy. So ultimately, to Ashwapati, this secret nature gives all her possessions, all her secrecies, all her power, all her law. In the beginning she was resistant, just as a woman is resistant with a man. This secret nature was also resistant with Ashwapati, but ultimately there is a joy of giving. So she herself she gave for rapture and for use. You see, that is the Prakriti. When she gives herself, there is the joy of the surrender. You see, it is not a compelling, but in the beginning there is a kind of a reluctance. I don't want to give myself, but suddenly there is a turning point and she says, no, I surrender myself. So not only for the rapture and for use by the Purusha, absorbed from aberrations in deep ways, the ends she recovered for which she was made. She turned against the evil she had helped, her engined wrath, her invisible means to slay. This is a nice thing. We understand how it works. Absorbed from aberrations in deep ways. You know, these aberrations are the deviations of the moral notions. So the nature, or this physical nature and the secret nature, they do bring in, as Sri Aurobindo puts in here, evil. She turned against the evil she had helped. You see, our life is not so smooth. We have anti-divine forces, we have evil, we have Rakshasas, we have demonic things, devilish things. All these things nature has brought into this evolution purposely. Because obviously that all of us know, if you have read the Mother, that all this evil has a purpose. It's not something undivine, as if, divine has made a mistake. That is what some of the religions would say, oh my God, this is a mistake. How can there be Satan? How can there be evil? If God is all good, how? He says no. This anti-divine forces are also forces consciously brought in by the divine himself. So nature also brings in all this evil, etc., only to enhance our progress. You see, the difficulties, the sorrows, the problems are there. You see, this is the difference. An ordinary, a person of an ordinary consciousness looks at them only as suffering and problem and pain. But a man who's trying to be more conscious, he looks at them as opportunities. That is why the Mother constantly tells us of becoming self-aware. Self-awareness is not awareness of the self. This is a simpler self-aware. That why did this problem come to me? Why did this emotion come into my mind? So the moment you become aware of the why, then you try to answer that why is it that I've suffered this wrong notion? And in your answering is your progress. Because when I say I've got this streak of jealousy because of this incident, then immediately you have put the focus light on the dark spot, and then she would say, put that white light. And then that dark spot gets erased or melted or absorbed. So this is the thing. Self-awareness is trying to find out the cause of your thought, your emotion, your actions. They may be good ones. I'm not saying they're all bad and wrong. Even the good ones. You say, my God, I helped out this person. Then you say, fine. What was the result of that? A wonderful harmony, peace, joy, unity, love. Fine. And that also I offer to the divine, saying, oh Mother, this was the harmonious feeling I had. This for you. But then I had the pain and the jealousies and the suffering. There also I put in the light. So this is why I am saying, she turned against the evil she had helped. Who? Nature has helped. Her engined wrath, her invisible means to slay. All these negative things, now the secret nature has gone against it, because these are the things of the lower nature, but on the secret nature, the higher nature, these things are not there. Her dangerous moods and arbitrary force, she surrendered to the service of the soul and the control of a spiritual way. This is the beauty, as I was telling you, precisely because I read this, I started with the beginning. The end is this, but when I gave the introduction, I said, this is the beginning. What is it? That she surrendered to the service of the soul. Who surrenders? Nature, Prakriti. What is her entire progress? When she willingly surrenders herself to the service of the soul. Because all these days is the soul which has surrendered itself to the service of Prakriti. But because of this tapasya, the self-control, the self-awareness, slowly, and the question of the witness aspect, etc., then there is a parting of the ways, it's as if. And then nature says, now I am at your service. A greater despot tamed her despotism. You see, a greater despot, of course the Purusha, he is the greater despot who tamed her despotism. You see, all these days the Prakriti was the despot, but now when the Purusha becomes the despot, he is a greater despot. You know, normally you see in man-woman relationship, normally I would say this, when you are in romance, you are having the romantic days, it is the Prakriti which has this control over the Purusha. But once married, when things become normal, you have a couple of children and all that, then you see the man slowly coming up with his ego, the despot taming the despotism. But here is in the higher sense that now Purusha has taken over the control of the situation, of the nature, and then assailed, surprised in the fortress of herself, conquered by her own unexpected king, fulfilled and ransomed by her servitude, she yielded in a vanquished ecstasy. Her sealed hieratic wisdom forced from her fragments of the mystery of omnipotence. And it's beautiful, extremely sensitive, you see. Now what is happening? This is the secret that the turning, the reversal of consciousness has taken place. What's happened? Assailed. Who is assailed? Nature, Prakriti. It is assailed, surprised in the fortress by herself. Now in her own kingdom, in her own fortress, is the Purusha, the king says, now I am the king, you are the queen. All these days, you being the queen, acted like the king. But now our roles are reversed. So nature is surprised in the fortress because now she is conquered by her own unexpected king. Suddenly there is this realization, the king, the Purusha, the Atman says, I am the king, I am the Purusha, I am the ruler. So, conquered by her own unexpected king, it is the Purusha, Prakriti is conquered, but fulfilled and ransomed by her servitude. You see, the word beautiful is, the word is ransom. You see, when somebody is kidnapped, to release the person you have to pay a ransom. The fellow who the kidnapper says you have to pay this much of money to get this person released. So that's called the ransom. So here, the nature, the Prakriti, has paid ransom to the king, to the soul. And what kind of a ransom? Service. I will serve you for the rest of my life. So that is the guarantee I give you that I will be your servitor. So now the king has taken over, he has got the ransom, he has got a servitude, and Prakriti herself, what is she doing? She yielded in a vanquished ecstasy. Look at the juxtaposition. Vanquished ecstasy. How can there be vanquished ecstasy? A vanquished means you have lost the battle. But here is not losing the battle. You are vanquished because you have surrendered yourself to the divine. Saying all these days Prakriti says to Purusha, I thought I was the king, I was the ruler. But now I realize You are my master. So in my surrender is my joy. In my vanquishing is in my being vanquished is my ecstasy. And doesn't use the word joy, it's ecstasy is the supreme joy. See. So we can imagine, I won't use the word same vanquished, but when the mother met the master for the first time, 29th March, 100 years back, Sri Aurobindo writes, this is the first time I have seen somebody surrendering so fully and totally. So that must have been the total surrender, that vanquished ecstasy. So both Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they felt this ecstasy, one who receives the surrender, the other who gives the surrender. But there is this ecstasy. And then the unexpected king, I can see the word Sri Aurobindo standing on the staircase, and suddenly she sees that unexpected king, standing in front. Her sealed hieratic wisdom forced from her, What is this vanquishing? All her wisdom, all her levels, all her sacred wisdom, all has been given to her, and fragments of the mystery of omnipotence, everything that she possessed from the omnipotence or the superconscious, she surrenders. Exactly like the mother did. She made her being into what is called a blank slate. She gave to Sri Aurobindo everything of herself, mystery of omnipotence, her wisdom. She makes herself a tabula rasa. And that is what is most enigmatic. That a person who has achieved the supermind by then, achieved in the sense has come to know, just as Sri Aurobindo came to know. Both of them did not really go into the region of the supermind and inhabit it there, but they came to know the supermind as it is. So there is a kind of a question answer from between Nirodharan and Sri Aurobindo. Nirodharan or somebody, I forget. They said, you have written about supermind so much even before realizing it. How could you do that? Sri Aurobindo says there is a difference between realizing and knowing. You see, I can know about America even though I have not been to America. I can tell about it. Through some other means I have come to know TV and internet and all that. So I have seen what is New York, I can give description. But when I go to New York, that's a different thing. So similarly, Sri Aurobindo and the mother also, by the time she came to Pondicherry and met Sri Aurobindo, she has already known the supermind. She has given descriptions of that to the women in Japan. She tells what is the supermind. So you have a remarkable achievement here, the mystery of the omnipotence, and all that she offers at her feet. And there is this vanquished ecstasy. Well, reading that is a vanquished ecstasy. We'll stop at that.